Now we're going to talk about production. We're going to take a peek at how a very abstract firm makes choices about how much to produce and how to produce it. Start with an abstract production function. A firm takes in certain inputs and creates an output. This might be profoundly transformative. A farm takes seeds, lands, and people to create yummy foods. Or it could be rather minimal. Delivery company takes inputs from one place and brings them someplace else. And usually it's a problem if the input has been transformed with dents or dings or breakage. It's still really important. Most of us get to school because the MTA delivered us from one location to another with minimal breakage. But those different types of production can still be reduced to an abstract production function. We'll look at one output at a time. Though lots of actual firms might produce a variety of outputs. A coffee shop offers espresso or latte, iced, usually some tea, other drinks, various food items. So to make this single output, there are a wide variety of possible inputs. I'll go through a few broad categories. We can argue about the boundaries. First is labor, the work of human beings. This work can have a huge variety of types. Some human input is simple muscle power, lifting heavy things. Some is fine manipulation. Some is monitoring that some other process is going properly. Some is managing the people who are doing those previous types of work. Some is coming up with new ideas about what work could be done. There are skills involved, previous amounts of training, education. The next category is capital goods, machinery and equipment, fertilizer, tractors, even inventory available for sale. Then there's technology, the blueprints of some item to be produced, or the web page, or the code running the analytics. Then land or real estate for where the farm is to be located. Natural resources, whether the sunlight and rain that falls on a farm, or the material dug out of a mine, or the clean air the workers need to breathe. I've added management and entrepreneurship as well. We could argue maybe that's part of labor, or maybe it's different enough. It depends. And note that I'm using function in a very mathy sense. Some list of numbers go in and a different number comes out. The level of abstraction can be frustrating at times, but allows us to concentrate on other aspects. Calculus is just very useful to understand the world. To understand this function, we start by wiggling the knobs. What happens to output when any single one of the inputs is changed? That gives the marginal product, the amount that output increases when an input is increased by 1 unit, whatever that unit is. And let's not get too hand-wavy with units without at least noting they should all have some common basis of time unit. If a business is hiring workers by the hour, making decisions about how many more hours to take, then the rest of the units should be by the hour too. Now, obviously, most businesses don't pay rent by the hour. Probably got a lease that goes by month. And some machinery is purchased and will last for years. So it's actually not simple to try to get all the units and the inputs to even line up for time. But still, it's useful for understanding the world, such as how so many business units are happy to rent machinery. It helps the accounting. But whatever, eventually we figure out what is delta y over delta x, where x is any one of those inputs. The ratio of those deltas is the marginal product. In multivariate calculus, this would be the partial derivatives. Now, for all these calculations, we're only considering what-if scenarios. What would happen if one of the inputs were increased? That's a separate question from how much would it cost to increase an input, or is that a good business decision? So often here, we break down big questions into a series of smaller questions. To get closer to business decisions, we want to understand marginal cost, which is how much cost changes when we increment output by a small amount. This is a local concept. How much does cost increase if the business sells one more unit? That's a coherent question that has to carry a lot of details. For a restaurant to sell one more meal might be quite inexpensive. That's why they often let employees eat cheaply or for free. But opening another restaurant location might be rather more expensive, certainly over a different time horizon. But we can think of splitting the decisions about how much more output costs, that's the marginal cost, from how much could be made by different input combinations. This split of decisions can be very useful because different people can focus on different questions. Sometimes decisions are made by different businesses, sometimes by different business units. A startup that's manufacturing some new items might source it from overseas. The startups here in New York, they don't care how it's manufactured. Take more machinery or more labor, they just know what it costs. That's all they need to know. And make decisions from that basis. A multinational corporation is probably the same. U.S. office needs more items to sell. All they need to know from the manufacturing unit is how much it costs. The manufacturing unit cares about marginal products. They try to figure out the lowest cost way to make one more output. But then their buyers only care about, okay, how much it cost. I mean, it's an extreme assumption, as the buyer doesn't care, doesn't need to know. Obviously, in the real world, that's not quite true. Some buyers want organic, some want to ensure there's no child labor, any varieties of things. As I mentioned before, the time horizon is really important. If a restaurant's really popular, then in the short run, there'll be lines of customers. They could open a little later, a little earlier, pay their staff overtime. They can get more equipment, make larger pots in the kitchen to make more food. They can do renovations to expand the kitchen. They can squeeze in more tables. They could open a new location. But only over longer time horizons. In the short run, they have fewer options. If they get slammed with a lot of customers in an hour, they can't just open a new location. They have to work faster and our customers have to wait longer. The restaurant's rent is a fixed cost, usually per month. They pay it no matter how many customers they have. Farms usually have fixed cost over the growing season for the land and other stuff they're using. Now, in the long run, all costs are variable. The company can eventually get out of their lease, whatever. So it means over longer time horizons, supply can vary more. It can be more responsive. If prices are high, then in the short run, it might be difficult to produce more. But in the longer run, supply can be increased. Or if prices are low, then in the short run, firms will sell at a loss. In the longer run, they might shut down or exit the industry.